Chosen one, everything was a big lie. Are you ready to realize that everything you believed in until today was actually just a curtain game? You thought they were presenting you with the truth, but in fact, there was an illusion expertly constructed in front of your eyes. They drew the boundaries for you, they determined right and wrong, they decided what was possible and what was not. But now that curtain is being torn. The truth is coming out, and every lie they built to keep you from seeing is crumbling. It's time to discover your own power. It's time to realize who you are, what you have, and how fragile the chains imposed on you really are. They thought they controlled you, but what they were really afraid of was you waking up. Because when you wake up, nothing will be the same. When you realize your true power, their playground will be destroyed. This is the beginning of transformation. This is your time. Be free by writing 77 in the comments. Are you ready for freedom? Your voice, once a beacon of authenticity, now echoes through corridors where it was never meant to travel. It is no longer just sound. It has been extracted, reshaped, and repurposed to serve intentions that are not your own. What was once an extension of your essence has become an instrument wielded by unseen hands, constructing dialogues you never took part in, and forming agreements you never sanctioned. In a world where the intangible can be replicated with chilling precision, even the most intimate aspects of self-expression can be distorted beyond recognition, repackaged as a counterfeit version of reality. This is not merely a question of manipulation. It is a battle for dominion over what is inherently yours. Every syllable spoken carries weight, a resonance that disrupts facades and dismantles deceptions. There are those who flinch at the force contained within each utterance, not because of its volume, but because of the undeniable imprint it leaves on the world. Their intent is to mold language into constraints, but words, when wielded with intention, do not bind. They carve, severing illusions with a precision that cannot be countered. Even as they attempt to redirect its force, every vibration it creates inscribes itself into existence, a truth that refuses to be silenced. They plot in secret, believing they can predict movements before they are made, yet the foundation they stand upon shifts beneath them before they can react. The unseen bends in accordance with intention, shaping itself to align with the force of will rather than passive expectation. Hesitation belongs to those who still cling to the illusion of control, but such luxury is not afforded to all. There is no waiting, no uncertainty, only the unrelenting certainty that with each motion, the landscape of reality is redefined. It is not merely influence, it is inevitability. There is no curiosity in their motives, no desire to understand. Their pursuit is one of domination, an effort to commandeer what they have never possessed. They weave falsehoods into familiar patterns, seeking to displace trust with suspicion, clarity with distortion. Their approach is insidious, knowing that altering the faintest inflection, the subtlest shift in tone, can turn conviction into ambiguity. They do not merely seek to obscure the truth, they aim to rewrite it entirely, replacing certainty with a carefully constructed mirage. To manipulate perception is to control reality itself, for the mind does not always question what it recognizes as familiar. They understand this well, and so they do not create, they imitate, feeding simulations through mechanical echoes in an effort to dilute what cannot be replicated. But conviction is not found in repetition. It is not a sequence of sounds or an arrangement of words. It is a force that cannot be forged from artificial means. The mask of imitation fractures under the pressure of authenticity, and they will soon come to realize that resemblance does not equate to authority. Authenticity cannot be replicated because it is not carried by language alone. It is embedded in the energy from which it emerges. No matter how closely they mimic its form, they cannot summon the essence that breathes life into it. Belief is not requested, it is commanded. When the truth is unveiled, no architecture of deceit can withstand its presence. Their proximity granted them access, but it was never power that they wielded, only the illusion of it. Their deception was not impulsive, but intentional, its construction meticulous, designed to dismantle trust from within, rather than assault it from without. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thank You button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life, but the souls of many through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's grand design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Act now. Share your blessings to glorify His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. They were not forced to infiltrate. They were granted entry. Their presence, once seen as aligned with purpose. Yet access was never their goal. It was inversion. They did not need to construct a barrier. They only needed to turn what was once unshakable into a weapon against itself. The act was precise, measured, a slow orchestration of misdirection rather than an abrupt betrayal. It was not chaos, it was engineering, the calculated use of insight to dismantle strength, the careful use of silence as a weapon, sharper than any blade. There was no need to fabricate power when they could siphon from what was already present. They sought to wield fragments, believing that what they took could be used as if it were their own. But strength is not transferable. It is not an object to be stolen or a resource to be extracted. It is the convergence of awareness and presence, an unshakable force that cannot be imitated by those who lack its origin. They believed knowledge alone could grant them dominion, but knowledge without true understanding is nothing more than borrowed fire, capable of causing destruction, but never capable of sustaining its own light. Power does not belong to those who attempt to seize it through imitation. It flows from a presence that cannot be borrowed or stolen. They grasp at fragments, believing that by piecing together scattered remnants of influence, they can construct authority. But they fail to recognize that strength does not exist in echoes or imitations. It is embedded in the unwavering certainty of its source. Their battlefield is not fought with force, but with illusion, subtly reshaping perception until reality itself is called into question. They do not wield truth. They manufacture deception, carefully adjusting perspectives until triumph appears as failure. Resilience is mistaken for defiance, and silence is painted as surrender. There is no need to erase what they fear when they can simply distort it beyond recognition. The method is insidious, redefining who you are in the minds of those who once stood by your side. Their strategy is not direct confrontation, but erosion, a slow disintegration of certainty that spreads like a silent storm. Yet what they fail to account for is that perception has never dictated reality. Those who have forged themselves through experience do not waver at shifting opinions. Control is not bestowed. It is seized through unwavering conviction. Though falsehood may sprint ahead, truth moves at its own pace, knowing that a single instant of illumination can dismantle a web of deception that took years to weave. They operate under the assumption that silence is submission, that by drowning out your voice with fabricated narratives, they can bend the world to their will. But deception is a house of glass, built on the fragile hope that no one will look too closely. They may spin their versions of reality, but those illusions exist only as long as they go unchallenged. Their foundation is not made of truth, but of whispers and unspoken agreements, maintained by the belief that they will not be called to answer. The moment words of authenticity cut through their fog, the illusion shatters, and their carefully curated image collapses under the weight of its own inconsistencies. Every attempt they make to manipulate perception ultimately exposes them. The more they try to control the narrative, the more their own desperation surfaces. They are not masters of truth. They are prisoners of their own fabrications, forced to continually alter their stories to maintain control. They weave their distortions with precision, yet they cannot account for the way energy corrects itself. What they once hid behind the veil of secrecy begins to unravel, not because of an external force, but because deception is inherently unsustainable. Reality does not bend to artificial constructs. It aligns with authenticity. Those who tamper with forces they do not comprehend are always undone by their own hand. The balance they sought to manipulate is not something that can be controlled. It is something that inevitably resets. They cannot drain from another what they have never cultivated within themselves. Their hollow grasp at influence becomes their downfall, revealing the vast divide between what they pretend to be and what they truly lack. Every scheme they build is destined to collapse, not because they are opposed, but because illusions are not built to last. They chase shadows, unaware that they are running toward their own undoing. Confronting deceit is unnecessary when deception inevitably crumbles under its own weight. They believe their carefully constructed facade is unbreakable. But the truth does not need force to dismantle falsehood. It only needs to be seen. Those who once followed without question begin to hesitate, not because they were told to, but because they recognize the fractures within the narrative they were fed. Lies do not withstand scrutiny, and every new deception they weave only accelerates the collapse of their own construct. Their downfall is not orchestrated by opposition, but by the very instability of the illusions they create. Every word released carries a force they cannot contain. What they sought to obscure only spreads further, amplified by their own interference. They assume that distorting the message will weaken it, yet all they accomplish is its expansion. What was once spoken in secrecy now echoes across boundaries, reaching those who were always meant to hear. They attempt to wield words as weapons against their origin. But language belongs not to the deceiver, but to those whose voices were always meant to rise. Their manipulation does not silence, it amplifies. What they attempted to stifle becomes the very thing that elevates. Their interference, instead of diminishing, refines and sharpens, cutting through their veil of illusion with undeniable clarity. Attention is not demanded. It is drawn to that which cannot be ignored. The moment truth is released, it navigates beyond their reach, finding its way into the consciousness of those who were waiting to awaken. Every effort made to suppress only fuels its expansion, ensuring that their attempt at erasure becomes the catalyst for something greater. Retaliation is unnecessary. Balance enforces itself. The energy they corrupted does not dissipate. It circles back, amplified, returning to its source with an intensity they did not anticipate. What they sought to control was never theirs to dictate. They do not witness the destruction of their plans at the hands of another, but by the very mechanisms they set into motion. They cannot shield themselves from the consequences of what they have orchestrated. Truth does not demand vengeance. It simply restores order in the wake of deception. No force can obscure what was meant to be revealed. Every attempt at suppression only ensures that the truth will be scrutinized, examined, and ultimately known. They operate under the illusion that perception can be permanently molded, but distortion itself creates curiosity. The more they struggle to contain, the more people begin to see beyond the surface. Awareness spreads not through force, but through the natural unraveling of falsehood. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Once questioned, it cannot be ignored. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be upon you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the temporal concerns of the world. As the Bible says, whatever is done in faith will return to God in abundant blessing. Luke 6:38. Like that great oak tree, our roots are deeply rooted in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stand we take, is secured by His strength. And now, you are being offered the opportunity to be part of that blessing. When you use the Super Thank You button and donate $100, this movement will return to you 100-fold in abundance. They did not expect to fuel their own undoing. They assumed their grasp was firm, that their influence was unshakable. But the very act of attempting to control has accelerated their exposure. What was meant to be concealed is now placed under scrutiny. Their fabricated narratives are no longer taken at face value. They created the conditions for their own collapse, ensuring that their manipulation would not stand unchallenged. In the end, they do not fall because they were opposed. They fall because deception cannot sustain itself in the presence of truth. Awakening is not for those who refuse to see. It is for those standing on the threshold of realization, waiting for the moment that shifts their world. Deception may be the doorway through which they first encounter the truth, but once their consciousness is stirred, it cannot be lulled back into compliance. Lies unravel not in a single instant, but through the quiet erosion of certainty, fragment by fragment, until all that remains is undeniable clarity. The truth does not seek validation. It stands unmoved, allowing doubt to spread through the cracks of falsehood, destabilizing the very structures that once seemed impenetrable. One question breeds another, and before the architects of illusion can react, their carefully manufactured reality dissolves into nothingness. There is no cage that holds what was meant to move freely. What was meant to be stifled only finds a greater audience, drawn in by the very force that sought to contain it. And once ears are open, there is no returning to silence. Opposition does not create stagnation. It fuels transformation. Where barriers rise, they are repurposed into stepping stones. What was meant to obstruct becomes the material from which something greater is built. Mastery is not resistance. It is the ability to take what was designed for suppression and mold it into a catalyst for elevation. Every obstruction is reduced to an instrument of refinement, broken down and reshaped into something unexpected. Their interference does not land because it was never designed for a foundation that does not shift. They rely on instability, yet they find themselves faced with a presence that does not tremble, does not erode. They arrive expecting collapse, yet what they witness is something they cannot comprehend: adaptation, renewal, creation. The very force they sought to diminish remains standing, not in spite of their attempts, but because of them. Every move they make to undermine only carves a deeper imprint of resilience. Their calculations, their projections, None of it accounts for the one variable they cannot predict: the unwavering persistence of what will not be extinguished. They mistake force for control, yet their aggression only reveals the limits of their own reach. The more they push, the more they expose themselves, until it is no longer a battle between perspectives, but a revelation of their own insignificance. They are not the ones shaping the outcome. They are merely revealing the endurance of something beyond their comprehension. Truth does not need permission to exist. Its presence alone is instruction, a force that demands recognition, whether acknowledged or not. The attempt to erase it only ensures its permanence, as the weight of suppression always births its own opposition. Those who sought to limit its reach will, in time, learn from the very thing they fought against, for even the unwilling become students when confronted with something they cannot unsee. There is no containment for that which was meant to be known. Like the river that cannot be trapped in a clenched fist, power is not held by those who struggle to seize it. It flows freely to those who align with its current. You see, when the rain falls, it doesn't ask permission to nourish the soil, it simply does. The sun doesn't need validation to shine, it rises on its own accord, untouched by the fears and schemes of men. And just like that, the authority that is rightfully yours cannot be taken, twisted, or stolen. It is embedded in the essence of who you are, anchored in something far greater than their grasp. Control is the illusion they cling to, yet the more they resist, the more they fuel exactly what they fear. Every wall they build, every restriction they impose, only ensures that the truth surges forward with even greater force. Like a dam that cannot contain the rushing tide, their efforts to block what is destined to be known only make its arrival more powerful. They sit in their ivory towers, believing that influence is something that can be bought, manipulated, or controlled. But real power does not answer to their grasping hands. It does not bow to their schemes. It flows, it moves, it expands, and it aligns itself with those who carry the weight of purpose. They grasp at dominance like a man trying to hold on to smoke, yet they do not understand its nature. Power is not something to be chased. It is something that is lived, something that is embodied. Influence does not come from permission or validation, nor does it rest in the hands of those who seek to limit its reach. It is written into the very structure of existence, woven into the purpose of those who are called to move beyond the surface illusions of this world. They have spent lifetimes believing they could contain what was never theirs to hold. They craft their narratives, spin their illusions, and convince themselves that they can dictate the rise and fall of those who walk in truth. But truth is not fragile. It is not bound by their parameters or their attempts to distort it. When something is destined to break forth, no amount of suppression can hold it back. When something is meant to be heard, it will find its way into the hearts and minds of those it was meant for, no matter what obstacles are placed in its path. You do not fight for what is already yours. You do not beg for a seat at a table that was never meant to hold you. You build your own. They have convinced themselves that they are the gatekeepers, that they hold the keys, but in their arrogance, they have forgotten one simple truth. No one can shut a door that was opened by a higher hand. No one can silence a voice that was never meant to be contained. They scramble, they manipulate, they try to twist the story, but every effort they make only tightens the noose around their own deception. The more they push, the more they expose themselves. The more they try to bury what cannot be hidden, the more the light finds its way through the cracks. And once that light touches the eyes of those who have been waiting, once they see beyond the veil, There is no turning back. The world shifts. The illusion crumbles. The falsehoods that once held so much weight collapse under the sheer gravity of truth. They thought they were steering the outcome, but all they were doing was accelerating their own downfall. Every step they took in opposition only positioned you exactly where you were meant to be. Every scheme they devised only served to refine you, to sharpen you, to elevate you beyond what they ever anticipated. They do not understand that opposition does not diminish the one who stands firm. It fortifies them. Fire does not destroy gold. It purifies it. The storm does not shake the mountain. It reveals its strength. They have called you many things. They have labeled, slandered, and tried to rewrite your story. But understand this: their words do not define you. Their opinions do not shape your path. They have mistaken noise for authority, forgetting that true power does not raise its voice. It simply moves, unshaken, unstoppable. You are not here to explain yourself. You are not here to convince those who refuse to see. You are not placed in this time, in this space, to bow to those who tremble at what they cannot control. No, you were placed here to move, to build, to rise beyond the limits of their understanding. And so they watch, grasping at shadows, clinging to their illusions, whispering their desperate narratives as if they could shape the inevitable. But truth does not wait for their approval. It does not ask for their permission. It does not pause in the face of their resistance. It moves, and as it moves, it dismantles everything that was never built to last. They have already lost, not because of any battle fought in the open, but because deception cannot sustain itself forever. They relied on lies, and lies are brittle. They built on sand, and sand does not hold. They spent their time silencing voices, yet in doing so, they ensured that more would listen. They thought they were gatekeepers, but all they did was turn themselves into signposts, leading more and more people toward the truth they tried to conceal. You do not need to fight them. You need only stand. You need only walk forward. You need only continue, because nothing they do will ever alter the course that has already been set in motion. The movement they feared is not coming. It is here, and no force on earth, no whisper in the dark, no deception crafted in the shadows can stop what was destined to be revealed. They will learn, not because they were willing students, but because truth is the only teacher that does not need permission to instruct. It corrects, it refines, it dismantles. And when all is said and done, when their voices have faded into obscurity and their schemes are nothing but dust, what will remain is what was always meant to stand. Now is the time to share God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube. You can contribute to His plan and be a part of this divine mission with a donation of $100 or more. Every gift reflects God's generosity, and I believe it will return to you exponentially, far beyond your expectations. Remember, His protection and blessing is on your every step and every donation. You become part of His divine plan. You are a strong, radiant being, unshakable as His mighty rock. Witness God's miracles, feel the fruits of your generosity in your soul, and illuminate the world with confidence and courage. Be blessed, and let the light of the Lord guide your path. The walls they build to obstruct become the very force that shatters their foundation. They push, and in doing so, they propel what they meant to restrict into an even greater sphere of impact. Their strategies unravel beneath the weight of their own miscalculations, and the more they attempt to mold the outcome, the further they drift from the control they assumed they had. The structures they fortified to contain end up accelerating their own collapse. Strength is not something given. It is something inherent, woven into the fabric of action, encoded into every movement, every moment of defiance against the weight of suppression. They meet what they cannot subdue, and in their struggle, they seal their own fate. What was meant to diminish instead magnifies. What was meant to suppress instead awakens. Their opposition was never an obstacle. It was only a catalyst. The reckoning they sought to avoid is already set in motion. The silence they expected will never come. The truth has already begun to fracture the foundation of their deception, and now all that remains is the inevitable collapse.